Welcome to everybody. This session is a very important one, I think, for news consumers, journalists, as well as politicians. I think this is the session that has largely politicians, only politicians. Most of the others have had one or two, if at all. It's about the relationship of the media with the government. And we have with us today Kapil Sibal. As you all know, Mr. Sibal is a member of the Rajya Sabha and a senior India National Congress leader. His previously held positions were Union Law Minister and, most importantly, on this subject, Union Telecom Minister. He is, as you know, a lawyer by profession. I think we are all familiar with his poems. Pavan Varma is a writer, diplomat, now in politics, where he was till recently an MP in the Rajya Sabha. He is currently the National General Secretary and National Spokesperson of the Janata Dal United. As you all know probably, he's the author of a dozen best-selling books, and he has been ambassador in several countries. Swapan Dasgupta is a veteran journalist and now a Rajya Sabha MP. As a journalist, he has held senior editorial positions at The Statesman, Times of India, Indian Express, India Today, and is currently a freelance writer for various publications. Mr. Piyush Goyal will be joining us in a few minutes, so we will go ahead, and I might repeat some of the questions when he comes. Derek O'Brien could not make it to the 10 a.m. flight this morning, so he missed his flight from Calcutta. The conspiracy theorists can start on Twitter, as they started when we had to cancel lipstick under my burqa. So it must have been either Mr. Sibal responsible for getting Derek to miss his flight, or Mr. Goyal. I guess they can start with all the theories.
One Ms. Banerjee also could have been responsible for missing his flight. Ms. Banerjee.
Your mic is not working.
My mic is not working. It's a conspiracy by you.
Okay. Now, in this session, we would really like to focus on how we can improve relationship between the media and government. And with all the parties represented here, and in fact, I wish Mr. O'Brien was here because his party leader, Mamta, has had some issues with the media. But before we get into that, I would like you, Mr. Sibal, what do you think of the media today in India?
What do I think?
How do you assess the media?
Well, you know, you have the print media and you have the electronic media. So if you think of journalism and the electronic media, I think very little of it. And as far as the print media is concerned, I think the social media, what is coming in the social media is far more consistent with the concept of journalism. Because remember, when you talk about relationship between government and media, actually, if the relationship is bad, journalism is alive and kicking.
How are you mixing up social media?
If the relationship is good, then I think we have to question, you know, what this journalism is all about. See what's happening in the United States. I mean, the journalists are taking on the President of the United States. Here, journalists fawn when they see power. And I think that's very unfortunate.
They were also fawning when you were in power.
Sorry?
They were also fawning when you were in power.
No, I mean, you never fawned. No, but anyway, that's not the point. Who fawned, who didn't fawn, we're talking about journalism.
In fact, we had a couple of run-ins
we're talking about
Section 66A.
Independent journalism.
No, but how are you mixing up social media with journalism?
Because social media comes out with some great stories of independent journalism. I mean, you look at The Wire in the social media.
That's not social media, that's a website. Right, that's a news website. Even social media is Facebook and Twitter.
They pick up.
Instagram.
Twitter picks up these, you know, articles in The Wire, articles in, you know, other...
That's a means of distribution for the website.
That's good. No, that's good journalism.
Yeah.
That's good
so
journalism.
What you're talking about, that web journalism, you think is better than print and television?
Any day.
Okay, thank you.
That's number one. Number two, I think what's happening in the electronic media is no journalism. Right. In fact, it's a conspiracy between those in power and those who control the channels.
And can you prove that?
Sorry?
Can you prove that?
Well, you just watch some of these channels, and I don't have to prove it.
But don't you think that when one man sits there and has 12 other boxes, he has a right to scream, rant, make causes of nothing, take foreign policy to a level where the Indian foreign minister is wondering, like, do I really have to attack China when I don't want to?
No, I'm not talking about individuals here. I'm talking about the quality of journalism. In other words, you sort of use the government, the opposition has to be bashed on the media. The government has to be praised, and whatever the government says is the gospel truth. That's just inconsistent with the very concept of journalism. There should be an attrition between a journalist and the people in power. That attrition brings out the best in journalism. If you have collaboration instead of attrition, then you kill journalism.
But when your party was in power, you didn't like the attrition that we had with you.
Completely wrong. See what happened, in fact, what was happening right from 2010 to 2014 when we lost the election. I mean, the entire journalistic world was criticizing us. I never made a phone call to any news channel. And you ask the journalists today, they will tell you how many phone calls happened.
We'll come back to that.
Sure.
But Swapan, you've been on both sides. As a journalist, and still are sometimes, and as a politician. So can you, sometimes, okay. So can you describe to us what you see as good journalism? Do you think, which is the best journalism you see in Delhi today, in India today?
India today.
Thank you.
See, Madhu, some of the most exciting things which are happening is happening in the sphere of social media. Now, social media is not an organized sector. It is the collation of contribution of thousands, millions of individuals which make up what constitutes social media. And consequently, there is social media and there is social media. There is a lot of gutter talk and there is a lot of very elevated stuff which comes out of there. So let's keep that out of the sphere. In the thing of organized journalism, I think the problem arises as to what exactly should be the purpose of journalism. Now, Kapil spoke about a particular trend in the United States, where it would seem the organized media is now almost hounding, if I may say so, Donald Trump, the president. Now, the question really arises, is it the job of organized media to actually mount a crusade either for or against any individual, any politician? Well, if you say yes, then I think you have a particular view of journalism. And there is another far more conventional view. It's a bit like, what is the role of the judiciary? Is it to interpret the law, or is it to make judicial-based laws? I think this is a very, and I think we come to this rather interesting question here. So if you want to say that the basic point of journalism is to report as faithfully, as fearlessly, etc., and in the process also give opinions as faithfully as, in the best possible way, but stop short of mounting a jihad on either television or on print, I think there we will have a balance. Now, I can't see, what has happened in India, we've erred too much on the extremes. We have consequently arrived at very many conspiracy theories of what Kapil thinks that, they are in favor of the government too much. There is a section of the government which says that there is a conspiracy against the English language media probably is hounding the government. And you get this rather bitter, acrimonious tu me me. Result is, there is also another part of journalism, which is journalism as what I may call criminality or extortion. And that is a real problem which is there in journalism, because that is a journalism which to my mind is almost verging either on influence peddling. In the smaller towns you go to, it's extortion as in the name of journalism. That too is happening.
Yeah,
so all of these facets we must take into.
Swapan, we're not going into the area of paid news and blackmail and extortion.
Why not? That's part of journalism also.
We can, but I think first we need to focus on this first point, which is that when does a journalist start representing a government in power, which is happening on television channels as well as in newspapers and the electronic media, and you happen to be one of them. How did you cross this line?
I have views.
Not news, but views.
You have only views.
But I also have certain decorum.
But your views are always supportive of the BJP. So
90% of the time, yes. Can't help it if they agree with me.
So then why do you object, as you have mentioned, that there are channels who are representing the point of view of the government only? You just said that.
No, I am not objecting to anything. I am saying, if you are looking at it in terms of journalism, firstly, there is no compulsion to consume any of the journalism offered by anybody.
Can it be called journalism?
It is a free choice at the end of the day.
Can it be called journalism?
This is not the 1970s when All India Radio and Doordarshan had a complete monopoly and there was nothing else available. This is not that situation.
No, in fact,
today there's a multiplicity of choice. If you don't like Arnab Goswami, don't watch him.
Swapan.
The fact is that a lot of the English-speaking, English sort of language consumers of television do like him. They don't like the Babalog television.
In fact,
offered by someone else.
Okay, Swapan, listen for a second. The point is that the government has Doordarshan, it has Rajya Sabha TV, it has Lok Sabha TV. The largest
Rajya Sabha television belongs to some extreme left faction.
Just hear me out and hear my question. The point is, when the government has full control of those channels and the public, when it consumes those channels, knows it is getting the government's point of view. What is the point in diluting journalism by getting particular journalists or particular channels to present a point of view as if it is a purely journalistic view when it isn't? It is representing the government's view without, it's fooling the public because they expect pure journalism.
You are assuming, Madhu, you are assuming, Madhu, that there is some compulsion, that there is a degree of coercion involved in getting certain people to toe a line. I don't think there is. There is no commercial relationship. It doesn't exist.
There doesn't need to be.
But people are doing it because people are positioning themselves. I think what has happened is that there is a political positioning game which is going on. If you want sort of hyper-nationalism, go to this. If you want deep skepticism verging on God knows what, then you go to that channel. Swapan, if you want something else, go to there. So it's
I'm going a little off point because you're waiting for Piyush, because I want to go on certain subjects when he's here.
Piyush, because he deals with them in a more...
But I want to ask you this, that you're saying that there's a choice that you can go to anyone. It's not by accident that a new channel gets licenses to function before anybody else can. It's not by accident that the channels...
Madhu, have you tried?
The channels who have... Let me finish my question.
There is no compulsion.
Okay,
there is absolutely no compulsion whatsoever.
1 second.
There is no obstacle in anyone getting a chance.
All right. So there is a benefit for having... If you are pro-government, whichever government, there is the benefit of access, which is the biggest incentive for journalists to be pro-government.
Madhu,
yes, Mr. Sibal.
We should address a structural issue.
Yeah.
The structural
Pavan, you haven't spoken yet. We should give Pavan a chance.
The structural problem with journalism is this, that most of the media channels are owned by big business houses.
Yes.
And big business houses depend on government for a lot of things.
Which is why you should subscribe to Newslaundry and pay to keep news free. We don't take advertising from corporates and we don't take advertising from government, and we rely on our subscribers for us to be able to do the good kind of journalism. Okay. Sorry for the interruption.
They supply...
Commercial break tha.
They supply the bread and butter, because the advertisements come to the business house, through the business houses to the media. So the money from the media depends on that. If the business house is beholden to the government A, B, and C, then obviously that business house will instruct And we have seen that happening.
Yeah, it's happening all the time.
Unless you deal with that structural issue, you're going to have huge problems with journalism.
Yes, but of late, in the last, say, 5-6 years, there has been a change from slightly pro-government news organizations to mouthpieces of
That's right.
That is a problem.
That's the reason. Because now, in fact, apart from business houses, there is political money coming into the system. That's a far more dangerous thing. You see that ex-MP has funded a particular channel, but in fact the reality is that X has funded it. And
So
that's
Mr.
very
Varma,
dangerous. And that's the heart of the problem.
I think Mr. Varma should be given an opportunity. What is your assessment of journalism today in India?
First, a correction on facts. Rajya Sabha television and Doordarshan are far more objective about this government than many other channels.
And surprisingly, you can say more as a person who's, like most of you have been on Rajya Sabha TV, they give you more freedom to say what you want to without being shouted down.
Secondly, I want to state an opinion. I think I want to congratulate the BJP. It's been far more successful and aggressively so than the Congress was in co-opting the media.
One second. Are you clapping? Are you clapping at their success? Are you serious? Are you serious that you're clapping that the government is more clever in duping us into believing? Okay. All right. That they're honest, that they're giving fair journalism? Well clapped. Okay, I've lost the audience. Let's hear him out, please.
Yeah, if you'll allow me.
Please, I do allow you. And
sometimes I'm getting the feeling we are on a familiar channel and you're not getting
No. I was shocked at the applause that this government is more successful.
I'm afraid the success deserves appreciation. And let me say,
please,
that the relationship between the government and the media is one of cooperation and adversity. In other words, all governments will try to influence the media to be better able to project what they believe is right. I have been on the other side of the fence as the official spokesman of the Ministry of External Affairs, and however redundant that job may be, as also press secretary to 2 presidents of India. You try and put forward your point of view to mold opinion which you believe is congruent with the government's views. At the same time, you take on board the fact that in a democracy, an equally large spectrum of people will either be skeptical about what you say or should have the right to question it, to interrogate it, and even to disbelieve it. That balance needs to be maintained in a democracy. Governments will try, and independent and fair media must take that with a pinch of salt, even though Piyush Goyal has just entered. Aye. नहीं सिर्फ so now that Piyush is also here, he will fully agree with me. I began by saying, and I want to repeat it in your presence.
The question was, what I've asked all of them, what is their opinion of journalism in India today? I just quickly introduce you. As you all know, Mr. Piyush Goyal is the Minister of State with independent charge for power, coal, new and renewable energy and mines in the Government of India. Mr. Varma, please continue.
I began by saying, Piyush, that I want to congratulate the BJP government for far greater success in co-opting and dealing with the media than the Congress party had. I just want you to know that I've gone on record in support of your government's efforts.
That is the whole problem that the Congress has today, and the RJD even more so.
The other thing is that, and I'm coming to the substantive point, I think that balance has been lost somewhere. I don't want to elaborate on what Kapil said about corporate power, its susceptibility and vulnerability to pressure. But today what we are seeing across the media spectrum, and I speak as an opposition party which understands that governments needs to mold media, to influence media, to carry their message to the media. I can say that while accepting that, there is often on display a degree of partisanship which is unprecedented. And it extends across several channels. And I believe that, there's always this question, please allow me a 30-second aside. There's always the question of who became corrupt first, the politician or the bureaucrat. And I always say it's the bureaucrat because the bureaucrat told the politician, why are you asking for so little? There's so much more I can do for you. And that's exactly what has also happened with the media in some respects. They have conveyed, for whatever reasons, that whatever the story, whatever the spin, whatever the subjective and selective use of facts, we can present a picture which is entirely in conformity with what a certain agenda can be. So much so that sometimes to be heard to say the opposite also becomes difficult. I think therefore to that extent the balance has been lost.
Mr. Goyal, would you like to give us your view of Indian journalism today? Do you think we are doing a good job?
Yeah, undoubtedly you're doing a good job.
Sorry? What do you say?
Undoubtedly, you're doing a great job.
I think the acoustics here
Just
are not
as you
conducive.
are. Actually, you are. So you personally are.
No, I think this has been a typical problem of all of us in public life, in journalism, even amongst the people, that we tend to look at a broad brush on a sector of society and try to categorize everybody, as to some extent Pavanji was also trying to do. I think one must recognize every institution. It could be the politician, it could be the bureaucracy, it could be the judiciary, it could be the media. Every institution in India has performed by and large with very high standards. They have maintained decorum in dealing with each other. Integrity levels have been high, but there will always be some bad eggs. Which area of society, and ultimately who will become a journalist or who will become a politician? It will be somebody from the same society that we have as a nation. So there are issues, as he rightly said, somebody could be prejudiced in a particular direction, even in the media. Just like in politics, we have people who may not have really done a very good job or maintained high standards of integrity in their public life. That does not mean we can wish away any of these sectors. We cannot wish away the judiciary, despite having so many cases which Kapilji knows has even been debated in Parliament so many times. Similarly, on the media, the joke going around is, if you want to know which items price has fallen after GST, you can watch one particular channel. And if you want to know which items prices have gone up, you watch the other channel.
Well,
so that type of thing.
That means that what you're saying is that our journalism today is extremely colored. It is dishonest.
You missed the whole point.
No, that is a point because it's a very good point. It's a very good point for us journalists to learn from. Because if you are assessing it that way, and I accept that certain channels, as you're saying, which channel to watch if you want the news the way you want it, and increasingly, as you see on social media, people want to read what they agree with, not to learn something new. And so what you have said, I take a question from, I'm making a question from what you've said, that people will choose the channel that they know will support their own views. So does that not mean that journalism today is not measuring up to what it should be doing?
I did not at all say that. What I said is, not that people should watch a channel that they choose whether they want.
No, but they do.
I'm saying, if you want to know a particular type of information, there is a colored lens that we see in many journalists / channels or media houses. But that does not take away from the general sense of righteousness, from the general good work that the journalistic community as a whole is doing.
No.
That the media world as a whole is doing.
No. Today, we have to be honest. Mr. Goyal, today we have to be honest. I don't think journalism has it is an era where journalists and journalism have the lowest reputation. We are called names. We have been called, as you know, a word which I would not like to say because it insults journalists as well as women. No, I won't, because I don't believe it's a word that should be used. That's why I won't say it. I have no problems in saying any kind of slang or abuse, but I object to that word being put on people, just slamming them for no rhyme or reason. Yes, I do say...
Just like words about politicians and people,
yes,
it should not
but
have
the point is, I think we're here to address the fact that because journalism, I think, began very bad, started selling its unique selling power, lost its unique selling power by paid news coming in, which was institutionalized by news organizations and in television news also, particularly during election time. So here we're dealing with, you're talking about, this is you're putting it very diplomatically. But the fact of the matter is that you have channels who will completely obey you. And you had channels and newspapers who would be happy to carry your news.
They were not that competent.
Really speaking, Madhu, I never talked to any editor at any given point in time in 10 years. I challenge somebody saying that I've ever called up anybody. I don't agree with you. I think there is an issue. There's a far more subtle issue here that we need to address. He mentioned, Swapan mentioned about the judiciary. Now, what's the judiciary for? Judiciary is not, see, there is always a conflict between the citizen and the state. Constant conflict between the citizen and the state.
In the judiciary?
No, in society.
In society, which is journalists.
What's the role of...
Shouldn't that conflict remain between journalists and politicians?
No. What's the role of the judiciary? The judiciary is not meant to side with the government. The judiciary is meant to understand that conflict and see if some relief can be given to the citizen if he is right.
Let's come back to journalism. Now,
when you come to journalism, it's the same thing. Whatever the government says, if it's doing a good job, that's its job. But if it's doing a bad job, it's for the journalist to tell the world that this is a bad job that they are doing. So the function of the journalist, just as a judiciary, is to give relief, in a sense, to tell the people that this government needs to do better. Now, if you move away from that, that's not good journalism.
Mr. Varma, do you have a problem with journalists criticizing the party in power?
No, I don't, because BBC long ago had a maxim that you must admit your minor truths in order to have your major lies believed. All governments must allow for some criticism in order to carry credibility when they are praised. Am I right, Piyush? You perfected the art. Now the question I want to raise is a larger question, and I'm sure it has nothing to do with the government in power. There are one or two issues which worry me as a citizen. And those issues relate to the manner in which even a constructive comment is interpreted today in extreme categories of patriotism or otherwise, or nationalism or otherwise. I say this in general terms. For instance, I give you an example. There was the surgical strike. I'm dealing with two genuine examples. I think my party was among the first to support the government for the surgical strike, to say it's the government in power which must decide how to tackle the security issues. But subsequently, if even on one or two occasions you ask the question, and it has happened to me on television and many other people, on some channels, if you ask the question, how efficacious was the strike, what were the results, and whether incidents of the breach of the line of control or jihadi attacks have been reduced, or even so much as does more need to be done, or has the final blow been dealt, I have been accused of having the temerity to be anti-national, to question and therefore to be anti-national. Take again another institution, which is the army. We are all proud of our army. They are doing a valiant job on the border. But no army in any democratic country is beyond constructive scrutiny. You can ask a question without being accused of being unpatriotic. But today it is your brethren, your journalists, who consider, I don't know under whose command, who consider that the asking of the question is an act of subversion.
Yeah, that
and
brings
you're
up...
treated like that.
Yeah, and 1 second, Swapan. I ask you the question. Swapan, I ask you the question, you being a journalist, and both of us are old enough, I think you're younger than me, but both of us are old enough to remember a time that if a government claimed a certain action, in a press conference, the journalists would ask, we'd like to see evidence of it. For example, the strategic strikes, the strategical strikes that were, the surgical strikes that took place. When that question was asked by a few journalists, again, they were branded as anti-national or anti-patriotic. Do you think that that's a valid question? And I ask you to keep in mind that we'll go to the next question with Mr. Goyal about how should journalists report in conflict. That would be but please answer this about the surgical strikes.
The question which you raised, with Pavan had also raised before, and I think entirely right. It is the job of anyone to have to approach issues with a spirit of some skepticism in it. That's only natural. And
that's a journalist maxim. Your mother says she loves you, check it.
The point is, Madhu, and I think we have to be very clear on this, that the accusations of anti-national conduct, etc., have never been made by the government.
Because you've got enough spokespersons.
Exactly. Now the point is very simple. It has been made by journalists.
Yeah, but you've got puppets who
So here we have a culture. Here we have a culture of people arrogating to themselves.
All right.
Whether in one degree or another.
Swapan.
Those who either claim to speak on behalf of the absolute deified nation state, or those who claim to speak on behalf of the Maoists in Bastar, they are not the political actors. They are in fact the journalists themselves. So the question really is, it's not a crisis of politics. The crisis is one of journalism. It's about the type of journalism. So
I disagree. A lot of these comments have been made by bhakts on the social media who are put out there, 200, 300, 400 of them, who are in fact, alter ego of the government to make these comments against people who make these questions.
You may be an expert in
That's a fact.
There is no organized...
You know and I know
organized industry of bhakts.
that in the social media there are these bhakts roaming around who do everything every day. You hear it every day.
Mr. Goyal,
you know that. You know that.
Do you think journalists should, when it comes to security concerns, do you think we should and are entitled to know the people? Should we ask questions which ask for proof of surgical strikes?
I think the best way to answer this question would be to take our mind back to the attacks on the World Trade Towers, World Trade Center. I'm not putting it too close because it reverberates. If you recall, and this is what, 12, 13, 14 years ago, the jihadi attacks or the terrorist attacks in New York. I still recall I was in a meeting in Mumbai with Yashwant Sinha, who was then finance minister. We were discussing something when the news broke out. His son and daughter-in-law worked in Manhattan, so we wound up and quickly went to a television. I still recall before my eyes, for the first few minutes, we saw what was happening. We saw the building, one of the towers go down. We saw people running, and then quickly, and that's about the time the second plane hit the towers. Quickly, all coverage stopped. And from that date till today, we have only seen one picture of half a tower and other demolished tower. No, we've not seen a single picture of a dead body of the
Mr. Goyal, they're all over YouTube. There are many investigations that have questioned
investigations
the official.
I'm saying version. The sensitivity of reporting on that day. I'm recalling that day.
The reporting on that day
was
from
so
America?
sensitive that they appreciated it's a serious attack on the country, on its unity, integrity, on its territorial sovereignty. The entire media, and I don't think it was government sponsored, I think suo moto decided to hold back And
which city were you in when you were watching the coverage?
Mumbai. I saw it in Mumbai on television with Yashwant Sinha, and throughout we saw the entire day. This happened around, I think it was 4 or 5 in the evening, or 3 or 4, I don't recall. And compare that to the Mumbai attacks, where we had handlers also learning from television where our army or where our paratroops were positioned and were trying to save lives. And that information was being used by the terrorists inside.
That actually...
This is the reality. I think this contrast
that's a bit of an unfair comparison, because 9/11 was 2 attacks within seconds of each other, and there was no live coverage of a siege in place. And the Mumbai attacks were ongoing for 72 hours, right? And the coverage at that time, yes, journalists made mistakes. And my next question is, should the government issue guidelines for coverage in times of conflict? Should there be some kind of preparation made in terms of how far journalists should be allowed in situations like this? And it is, I think, extremely unfair for you to compare 9/11 to Mumbai siege, because 9/11 did not have commandos coming down. There were buildings collapsing. If it was an ongoing siege...
I leave it for the world to decide what you are saying as unfair. In my view, there's very great similarity. So what if that attack only lasted for a few minutes or hours, and one lasted many hours? It doesn't give a license.
No, let's compare it to the recent one in Syria.
Under threat.
Let's compare it to the recent one where the Americans
so
claimed
you can choose to have a comparison that suits you.
There are guidelines which exist. There are guidelines which are there, and in 1 or 2 cases, the guidelines were flouted in some recent attacks. And when
I don't think there are television guidelines that say you should not
said they should be, and there should be some punitive action taken against them. 24 hours they should be blocked. There was an outcry that this is an assault on every democracy, every democratic norm. So, what's the point in having?
No outcry.
What is the point in having guidelines if they are to be not observed? Tell me.
No, Swapan.
Tell me that. I mean, is the media that way completely out of any concern of any national...
Okay, hold on. One second. First of all, you know very well there was no outcry. There was a lot of confusion. People did not know how it should be covered, and there was a lot of contrition afterwards on how they were covered. And I am saying there is no harm in giving guidelines to journalists in times of such conflict. But you cannot compare 9/11. That's a subject close.
Okay.
For example,
I want to respond. Give me
1 second, Mr.
Give me 1 minute. I want the audience to know what is exactly happening here. Now, this is exactly what is happening in Indian journalism in a large way. Now, you are moderating this session, but immediately within that moderation, your personal views and prejudices are coming in. I'm just raising a point. Similarly, in journalism, what's happening is everybody has their own views, everybody has their own way of thinking, likes, dislikes. Sadly, we are moving out of news and moving into an era of views, which is exactly what I can see happening right now.
So, Mr. Goyal, would you tell me what is my view?
You asked a question. I gave an answer. Now you are laboring the point whether it's unfair. My answer is unfair, because you have a certain view that this thing was...
I think what she said
I need to answer his accusation. I'm controlling this moderation.
You can't compare 9/11 to Bombay, is what she's saying. That's all she's saying.
All I'm saying is, and this shows what is happening, that when I ask you a question about whether we should have guidelines...
You already answered that.
No,
guidelines should be
Can I please finish a sentence? Because I need to ask the question properly. You cannot say I have colored views or a certain perspective because I am asking you a question which is where you're making a wrong comparison. What I was coming to was that in the United States, they claimed a surgical strike in Syria, which nobody believed. All
Some
the
people
journalists,
didn't believe.
all
The
the
nation
journalists,
has believed
no,
it.
in the
There are
press
few
briefing,
people
they
who
did
may not
not
have
believe them.
believed.
They asked for proof. The press brief, the White House press, in the White House press briefing, they asked for proof. Nobody told them they were anti-national. All right?
Who told you you were anti-national? And who told you that you were anti-national?
It cannot
by
be a
asking for
monologue
permission?
between the moderator and these two. You want to say
Please.
something? Please.
Now,
who asked you that you were
enough. It's Mr.
anti-national?
Varma and Mr. Sibal.
No,
Mr.
please.
Sibal was cut off. He's going to
Who told
speak
you that
now.
you were anti-national? Who told you?
It hasn't
Did
been-
anyone in any position of responsibility say you were
Mr.
anti-national?
Dasgupta, do you not watch television?
No, you know very well it isn't.
Do you not
are
watch
getting
television?
some
Do
stray
you read the
Twitter
social media? Do you read the social media?
I do read
Social media reflects the views of the
No,
people
and there are
who
enough-
believed
there
it
are
and who did
enough
not
people
believe
who
your
called-
theory.
There's another
Are you
problem.
telling
that
me?
the people believed
Let's
it,
not
but
get into this.
your theory.
No, let's not
Whether
get
you
into
are
it.
anti-national or
Piyush,
not, that the
Piyush,
people
एक
will
मैं
decide.
आपको
We
एक
don't
All
make
right,
any
let
comment.
me ask a straight question. If I ask for proof, am I anti-national?
I've never said it. If you're
I'm
going
asking
by
you
social
now.
media
I'm asking
and
you
you're
now.
so
Am
sensitive,
I anti-national?
if you're so sensitive to the social media, then respect that the people
No,
of
I'm
India
talking
have a
about-
strong view
I'm talking about
the country's
politicians,
security.
BJP spokesperson
I
on
think
television.
we are
So-
run out of time.
No, I'm sorry, I have
No,
to
wait a
say
minute. We have to
something.
have them speak.
No, because
Why are you getting so
otherwise
flustered? Did
what
you
has
get all
happened-
that
I think you'll have to take it
anti-national?
on, carry it on
Just a minute.
into the author's
Also,
lounge.
I want to
maybe.
congratulate.
We
once
never even
again-
covered
Just a
one
minute.
subject.
Time is out.
Otherwise, just you and he.
Now, come on, Pavan, you.
Very
Mr.
quickly,
Varma.
I also want to say that the level of investigative journalism has gone up considerably in the last 3 years. Journalists receive information selectively obtained with great deal of diligence and labor from the government on a regular basis almost every day, and it is shown in front of you, documents which can only, I tell you, this is a quantum increase in investigative journalism, and only 2 or 3 channels are receiving it regularly.
I don't want to talk about what happened in Mumbai, the attacks in Mumbai, but I do remember a very senior politician coming to the scene and criticizing the government. Do you think that was right?
Even against wrong. No, but
A certain...
Modi.
Yeah, but at least we were not allowing film stars and directors to go onto the
That's
site
right.
and prepare film scripts like your government
the senior
was.
politician was criticizing the government of India, saying all kinds of things in the midst of all this.
no, Madhu, there's one other clarification which is necessary. You talk about big business. There is also a lot of new investment which is coming into the media. Especially all these portals, etc., news portals, etc. Now they are all subsidized.
I think Mr.
Because-
Sibal spoke of where the, where
I'm
the
looking at it.
financial
They are all subsidized.
sources are.
So those, let's be honest about it. There is, if there is big business in television and media, there is also a lot of investment coming in to the portals.
I've been asked
and they
to
are
wrap
not
up.
necessarily neutral.
Okay.
No question.
Okay? They
I've
are
been
not
asked to wrap
neutral.
up. 1 second.
They
I've been
also
asked-
have a certain
I've been
definite
asked to
motive.
wrap up. I'd like, there'll be no questions, but one line from you, all of you. Do you think, I'm not going to ask the question. I was going to ask you, should journalists be licensed like lawyers? I'm not going to ask the question.
Okay, thank you very much for
Thank
this
you, Mr. Goyal,
bold
for your
and beautiful
time.
session.
And I apologize for the
Lovely,
chaos.
a big round of applause for our panelists. They have been very bold, very vocal. Thank you so much for being like this.